I hope I don't curb your enthusiasm with this week's episode. Curb's origins go back to 1999, initially created as a 1-hour HBO special about Larry David returning to stand-up. It eventually evolved into a super successful, decade-spanning series. Even if you haven't seen it, you've definitely seen some of the memes or references that came from the show, especially its now super iconic theme song. Curb is the first show I'm going to talk about in this series because, in my opinion, it was the show that kicked off this whole surrealism subgenre that I keep going on about. The concept of the show was to show the real-life inspiration for one of the co-creators of Seinfeld, one of the most popular and successful television series of all time. Seinfeld is often called a show about nothing, as its characters are relatively normal people who get themselves into a number of mishaps, either because of their own actions or their reactions to people around them. Curb takes that concept and places it into the real world. If you remember from last week's episode, I called surrealism deliberate violation of causal reasoning. I was talking about like juxtaposition and a bunch of other stuff too. The violation of reasoning in Curb episodes come in the form of its supporting characters. Curb plots rely heavily on disagreements. The supporting character disagrees with an action done by Larry.
You know what you are?
What am I?
You're a self-loathing Jew.
Am I?
Oh, yes.
Jewish. I do hate myself, but it has nothing to do with being Jewish. Oh, pull in between the
Why
lines.
don't you stay between the lines of your own goddamn business, huh? Why don't you stay confined within the lines of not being an asshole?
You will fail.
Kidding around.
The women at this table and myself, I am offended by that.
Oh, please. We're playing poker here.
That kind of language is not allowed in a game, in a decent game.
No matter how unreasonable his arguments may seem, Larry always feels justified in his actions because of the outrageous, over-the-top reactions he gets from the people he interacts with. We understand where Larry's coming from because we've all been there before, whether it's dealing with a pig Parker.
Pig Parker.
A pig Parker.
Yes.
Or an ajar door.
Out of nowhere. You're here now.
Ajar. You left the door ajar.
We've all been through the similar situations. The only difference is where we might not say something about it, Larry always does. Curb Your Enthusiasm is like self-fulfillment fantasies for the people who wish that they said something. The comedy of the show comes from the normalcy of the situations and the anormalcy of how it's being treated. Seinfeld was created to be a satirical representation of the world. Curb is just a satirical representation of the world that acts as the inspiration for the creation of another satirical representation of the world. Think of it like Seinfeld is the stick figure and Curb is the Mona Lisa. They're both drawings of people. One is just vastly closer in detail to what it was supposed to be based on. That's what Curb does. It takes those tiny details in reality and fucks them up just enough to make them surreal. Curb Your Enthusiasm is a representation of the world seen through the eyes of a man who feels like no one ever agrees with him. And as crazy as it may seem, we always do. Well, that was my in-depth look at surrealism and Curb Your Enthusiasm. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you want to see what show I'm going to talk about next, and leave a comment if you can think of any shows that feature surrealism. See you next time. Big peace.